Neil Armstrong. Who was Neil Armstrong? Neil Armstrong was an astronaut. In 1969, he was the first person to walk on the moon. Neil Armstrong traveled to the moon with two other astronauts. Their mission was called the Apollo 11. That's Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, Buzz Aldrin, and these three were the Apollo 11 astronauts. Growing up, Neil Armstrong was born on 5th August 1930 in Ohio in the United States of America. He loved planes when he was a child. Neil learned how to fly a plane when he was 16 years old. He flew planes for the U.S. Navy. Neil flew in a plane like this one here when he was 6 years old. And that's Neil in uniform of the U.S. Navy. And that's Neil Armstrong's plane. The space race. In the 1950s, the space race was a race to send the first person into space. The USA and Russia both wanted to win the space race. The USA still wanted to beat Russia. They asked NASA to work out how to send astronauts to the moon. Over here we have NASA astronauts learned how to leave a spacecraft and float in space. In 1961, Russia sent the first person into space. His name was Yuri Gagarin. Neil and NASA. Neil Armstrong worked for NASA in the 1950s. He tested planes to make sure they were safe to fly. In the 1960s, he became an astronaut for NASA. He learned how to fly a spacecraft. Here's Neil. Neil flew over 200 different types of planes for NASA. Here, Neil went on his first trip into space in 1966. Space training. In 1969, NASA was ready for a mission to the moon. They asked Neil, Buzz, and Michael to go. No one had been to the moon before. It was dangerous, but Neil and the other astronauts were brave. Here we have a picture of the astronauts practicing to wear their spacesuits before they leave. Here, the Apollo 11 astronauts smiling as they went into the rocket. Liftoff. On 16th July 1969, Neil Armstrong and the other astronauts left Earth in a spacecraft. A rocket carried the spacecraft up into space. It took 4 days for the spacecraft to reach the moon. Michael waited in a part of the spacecraft in orbit. Neil and Buzz flew another part of the spacecraft down to the moon. Here we have the Apollo 11 rocket went up into the sky after its liftoff. Here the rocket traveled up towards the moon. And here the Apollo 11 astronauts saw Earth from their window of their spacecraft. Walking on the moon. Neil Armstrong left the spacecraft first. When he stepped on the moon, he said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Neil and Buzz explored the moon for over 2 hours. They collected soil and rocks to bring back to Earth. Here we have the astronauts wore spacesuits that helped them to breathe in space. Here the astronauts put the flag of the USA on the moon. Back to Earth. The astronauts joined Michael in space. Then they flew back to Earth in part of the spacecraft. They landed in the ocean. The Apollo 11 trip to the moon made people very excited. The USA had beaten Russia. Here we have people came in a boat to help the astronauts leave the spacecraft when they came back to Earth. Here Neil Armstrong and the other astronauts rode in a parade to welcome them home. Later years. After his trip to the moon, Neil Armstrong was famous. He was given awards and medals for his hard work and bravery. Neil Armstrong died in 2012. He was 82 years old. We will always remember him as the first person to walk on the moon. Over here, we have Michael Collins, Neil Armstrong, and Buzz Aldrin showing their medals. And here, other astronauts went to the moon after Apollo 11. They drove a rover and explored. The end. I hope you enjoyed that little life history about Neil Armstrong. Thank you.